When Carl Benz invented the automobile in the late 1800s, I bet he never thought that in 100 years, cars would be doing this. This is WRC history, the modern era. From the basic Group A cars of the late 80s to the high-tech WRC machines gracing the stages today, we chart the history of one of the most exciting motorsports on the globe. Coming up in this week's show, Lancia, the most successful team ever. We speak to their team manager and find out what really made them so unbeatable.
Our board management in Fiat say the important is to win.
Their biggest rivals at the time were Toyota. We have a look at the team that managed to break Lancia's stranglehold. Plus, we chronicle all the winners and losers from 2 decades of some of the best rallying action ever seen. Rallying had already emerged in the late 60s as a professional sport, with minis taking the helm. The Ford Escort, Renault Alpines and Lancia Stratos of the 70s brought rallying to people's attention. Spectators came out in their thousands to watch dramatic sideways action and the bravest of drivers in the world. And the 80s brought the extravagant, magnificent four-wheel drive monsters of Group B. The Peugeot 205 T16s, the Audi Quattros, the Lancia Delta S4, the most powerful machines to take to a stage, but also the most dangerous. It took the deaths in 1986 of Henry Toivonen and co-driver Sergio Cresto in Corsica before Group B was deemed too dangerous by far and was banned. It was time for rallying to regroup and reinvent itself. What the FIA came up with was Group A.
The Group A car in 1987 was a showroom car with a roll cage stuck in it, sump guards, stiffer suspension, and the engine tuned as much as it was allowed within the regulations. Very much a standard car.
Would the absence of supercars ruin the sport, or would there still be public interest in machines that look like mum's shopping car in comparison? These were the questions on everybody's lips at the end of 1986.
Group A was a little bit of a letdown at first because the cars were slower, looked nothing like as exotic or dramatic. So it was fairly low-key at first.
On a spectator's point of view, everybody was very disappointed because everybody loved the cars, because you couldn't even imagine how fast they are, and you could hear the sound and everything. And then you got like a road car and you say, well, I could drive anything like that, like a Group A car in '87 was like a road car. And yeah, it was very disappointing, but what I was surprised with how many spectators went out and see really that even smaller cars, less powerful cars, making a good show out.
The Group A were cars very similar to the day-by-day car, to the car that somebody buy for our lady to go for shopping. So everybody said, oh, how we can have rally with this? How driver like Biasion or Cancun or Riol or any other one can drive this kind of car? They will refuse to do this. But then, at the end of the day, they jump into the Group A, and they had the possibility in this, with the Group A, to take the maximum of the car, you know, the maximum, and give sometimes over the limit without the problem that they meet with the Group B.
Before the 1987 season started, scepticism had prevailed, but as time passed, it became apparent that rallying was doing well. Audi hastily pressed an oversized 200 Quattro into service, Ford introduced the Sierras, and Mitsubishi had the Galant.
Got new manufacturing. You had start with a new technology on four-wheel drive systems. The car got more efficient. Everybody adapted very quickly on the Group A regulation, and like I said, you got many more manufacturers. Also, more people could win rallies.
Within a year, those cars were up over 400 horsepower. The following year, 1 year into the introduction of Group A, those cars were beating the times of the Group B cars at nearly half the horsepower. And what happened was there was a huge focus on developing tyres, developing suspension, making the chassis better.
And how did the drivers adapt? Some said that the heavier Group A machines would require a measured technique, the neatest lines, and inch-perfect use of the roads.
We were looking more at racing lines rather than really aggressive sideways style of driving that had existed before that. With a Group B car, if you made a mistake, you had so much power, you could recover speed quite quickly. With a Group A car, it took a while, and therefore the drivers who were smooth, straighter lines, were the ones that could get the speed from those cars.
You need to grow into the Group B with the power. So when young drivers got into the car, they find it really good fun to drive, but you need more experience to handle those cars. And when cars came up with lower power, of course, more people could handle it straight away and could adapt to the driving technique what the car has been asking. So we had more and new drivers who could win the championship against people like Kankonen or Salonen or Mikkola, who was still driving. They got really forced to go much quicker than what they ever thought they have to do when they come from Group B to Group A.
So rallying was far from over. After the break, the most dominant force to hit the World Championship, a team that took an awesome 6 consecutive manufacturers' titles, Lancia. And the Japanese effect, how the land of the rising sun turned European car manufacturers on their head. All that and more coming up in part 2. Welcome back to the history of the World Rally Championship. The first team to take full advantage of the new Group A rules were Lancia. Already renowned as a championship-winning team with the Stratos, they had also been a force throughout the Group B period. But it was their domination of the years 1987 to 1992 where they took the championship by storm.
It was created the world Lancia legend. Is a legend because a team that was able to win for 6 consecutive years the manufacturer title and in the same time three driver championship today is unique. There is not any other make that is arrived at this level.
They had a very strong team overall, strong management, good engineering, a succession of fantastic drivers, and a really good understanding of the sport of rallying and how to get the very best from their resources.
They had a brilliant team manager, Nini Russo, who, you know, had the measure of everyone. The guy was a genius. They had a great team of mechanics. They had a fabulous car.
I think they was the only manufacturer who really got into this Group A regulation straight away with a four-wheel drive car, and they had I think probably one of the best package together. It was quite a small, tiny car. They had a good engine on it, a good four-wheel drive system, and pick up good drivers. And they made their development quickly.
Lancia's successes were partly down to a win-at-all-costs mentality that sometimes stretched the rules.
They were tough. Every event they came with something new, and you know, the mark was raised every time, and they were a good, tricky bunch of competitors. You know, we're talking about a championship back in the early 90s that was nothing like as well regulated as it is now. There was a lot less regulation, a lot less application of regulation, a lot more liberty and freedom taken with interpretation. That's not to say anyone was cheating, it was just interpretation.
You always knew you were up against it with Lancia. If there were any tricks to be played, any special tweaks, you could be pretty sure that Lancia would pull them.
The reason of the success of Lancia was that we have interpreted the rule existing at that time. We have used all the possibility we have, like for example the use of the aircraft for the communication, the use of the helicopter for make service. We were always thinking something new, what we can do to improve, even if we were always at the top. Mr. de Coubertin said the important is to participate, but our board management in Fiat say the important is to win.
For me it was always fascinating because it was a real Italian team. And nowadays, if you look into teams, they are very international. In Lancia at the time, rarely anyone speak English. you know, the mechanic could not really communicate. So it was, for them, was a closed circle with all the information, all the development. If you couldn't speak Italian, you could not communicate. And I think that was a little bit the part of success on the beginning, that it was like a closed circle and everybody was working for the country.
It was a team that was a family, first of all, a mechanic, the engineering, the technicians, the driver, the management, everybody at the same level, but everybody with his role, you know, the respect of each other, everybody with his role.
From the emergence of Group A to 1990, the sport was dominated by two men, Juha Kankkunen and Miki Biasion. When he won the championship for Lancia in 1987, Kankkunen became the first driver to retain his championship crown. His 86th title was with the Peugeot 205 T16. He also became the only driver to win championships in both Group B and Group A cars.
A truly fantastic driver, very adaptable. Very little seemed to faze him. Even if there was a problem with the car, he could drive around it. If things went wrong, he accepted it without too many dramatics. And I think that helped him get a lot of success that otherwise he might not have done.
But Juha was well known for being adaptable. His career 23 wins came with 6 different manufacturers. His third driver's title came in 1991 with Lancia, and he broke yet another record in 1993 when he became the first ever driver to win 4 championships.
At this point, it was probably like Sebastian Loeb nowadays. He has been 4 times world champion on different cars, and he could compete about anything, and he was quick.
His main rival at the time was Miki Biasion, an Italian with incredible consistency, finishing on the podium on over 50% of the rallies he entered. And in the 2 years he won the championship, he won 3/4 of the events he contested.
I would say Miki Biasion, Tiziano Sivieri's co-driver. This was a fantastic crew. I believe that he was really always thinking and concentrated on winning and beat the other, including the teammates, because at the end of the day, the most, let's say, fastest competitor were inside the team.
Miki had a full background, full support, probably like Sebastian Loeb. French team, full support, grown up in the team, same with Miki Biasion. And I think that made him strong right during that two years when he won the championship.
Lancia may have dominated the first 3 years of Group A, but the next 3 weren't to be as easy. And that was mainly down to this man, Carlos Sainz. His car, the Toyota Celica, had previously been fast but fragile. In 1990, the car came of age. Sainz won his first ever WRC event in Greece, and then an incredible 8 consecutive podiums helped him to the title. But it was the victory in Finland that stood out. He became the first non-Scandinavian to win there.
I think it was a shock to begin with. It was always Scandinavian people or Finnish people winning the rally, and really nobody really had a chance. But then Carlos came and won it, and everybody was thinking that maybe we are losing the control and maybe Finnish drivers are not so fast anymore.
Toyota could have won the manufacturer's title if they hadn't been so focused on Sainz. Their sole other point scorer was Bjorn Voldegaard, taking his final safari win of an impressive 4-decade career. However, Lancia and their trio of rally winners, Oriol, Kankkunen and Biasion, were always in the stronger position. Sainz and Toyota were the strongest combination at the beginning of '91. Sainz won 5 out of the first 8 events. However, the end of the season saw uncharacteristic mistakes by the Spaniard, including this huge roll in Australia.
When you're winning a championship, you can't think of just winning events. You've got to think of seconds and thirds. They're important. Non-finishes are tragedies. And that year, he wanted to win more. He wanted to win events more than he wanted to win the championship. Ultimately, that's what caused the problem.
Kankkunen and Lancia capitalised on Toyota's and Sainz's misfortunes and took their 5th manufacturer's championship and Kankkunen's 3rd driver's title. 92 and Didier Oriol must have felt cheated when after winning 6 of 14 rallies, he still only finished 3rd.
Didier was in the Lancia and looked odds-on favourite for the championship, took a lot of wins, and towards the back end of the season looked as though he was going to walk it. But inexplicably, everything went wrong that could go wrong on his last few events, and he ended up losing something that really he should have taken a good deal earlier.
In contrast, Kankkunen finished on the podium on every one of the 9 events he started. This was enough for Lancia to score their 6th consecutive manufacturer's title. It was to be their last. Carlos Sainz won the 1992 Drivers' Championship with 4 victories, including his first Safari. It heralded a new era. After many years of trying, the Japanese were putting their feet firmly under the table of the WRC, and the European manufacturers had better watch out. But for Lancia, all good things had to come to an end. After 6 consecutive manufacturers' titles and 3 drivers' crowns, Lancia pulled out of the sport.
At the end of the day, what happened that we win too much, and it was decided to stop because they realized that a victory of Lancia was not anymore a news. What was the news if Lancia has won this rally or the world champion was not a news, so they decided to go in '92.
So the early 90s marked the beginning of a new chapter as Japanese manufacturer Toyota made their mark on the WRC.
TT, Toyota Team Europe, started off in the mid-70s as a private team, Anderson Motorsport, Uwe Anderson, former effective world champion, before the World Championship was inaugurated. He started the team.
Uwe Anderson had created it out of quite a small operation and moved into fantastic premises. It was great to have such a place to work, as I say, modern facilities, great workshops, everything you needed really to develop a rally car, build it and run it successfully.
Victory over driver and manufacturers champions Lancia didn't come overnight though. Toyota had some work to do on their Celica before it could compete.
It was clearly a very good car, and initially not fully reliable, but gradually they got the car strong enough to survive and to be competitive on most surfaces.
The time when I got to Toyota in 1990, that was when the car really got competitive. I mean, it was just on the edge in 87, 89, 90, they really start to win rallies.
And so the success came for Anderson's unique team. It was in 1990 that Spanish Supremo Carlos Sainz won the first of their 3 drivers' titles in the Celica GT4.
They'd taken Carlos at a relatively early point in his career, and he and the team developed together. Carlos, as you know, is a very competitive person, gives a lot of attention to detail, and in a way he drove Toyota to push harder to get the reliability and the performance that he needed.
We find a very strong competitor. It was nice to fight with them. They won some driver title, some with Sainz.
Sainz took a 2nd driver's crown for the Japanese marque in 1992, and a year later, Kankkunen and Oriol, having moved from Lancia, ensured there was a new name on the manufacturer's crown, taking it for Toyota, a feat they repeated in 1994.
Toyota, in fact, was a big competitor and possibly one of the best or the fastest we have in this 6-7 years of domination, you know, and so it's fair people, good relation, competitor, but with the respect of each other, but of course also with willing to beat them.
We learned everything with Toyota, and in that moment Toyota had a big budget, everything was, in that respect, was quite easy. And then they immediately realized Carlos was a leader, so whatever Carlos said, they would do. And the memories that I have from Toyota are fantastic. You know, that's probably the reason we went back in 98 and 99. But with Toyota, we spent 6 years altogether, so it was a lot of time.
The early 90s saw Toyota scoop 4 drivers and 2 manufacturers' titles, and they weren't finished just yet. We'll catch up with the Japanese team later in the show. There is no doubting that a huge part of TTE's success was down to Carlos Sainz.
There are two different Carlos, the driver and the person. The most professional driver I've ever met. I said before, and I keep saying it now, you know, for me rallying is before and after Carlos. I think he made a big difference, the way he approached rallies, how professional he was, trying to be fit. Now we see drivers training, but that was not normal before. And Carlos and myself, we were the first ones that started doing sport regularly. And as a person, he's a very good family man, fantastic family man. He loves to be with his family, he loves to be with his wife, with his kids. He's a completely different person, much more relaxed than you would ever imagine.
The Spaniard's professionalism was universally admired. Nothing was beneath or beyond his attention.
As a driver and as a teammate, I have the most immense respect for him. His ability, his focus. He just wanted to win, and he wanted to be surrounded by people that wanted to win. And when he felt he wasn't getting that, he didn't throw a fit. He actually worked to get people on side, to get everyone to win. And he was a great guy, an absolutely brilliant team member.
Carlos, we are still good friends. We have been good friends. We could get on very well with each other because we had the same spirit about testing, developing the car. When it got to the rally, Carlos could be turned in a total egoist. But that was his nature. You know, it was my tire and this car and this, and I take it. Didn't ask him about friends, but I think that is the way how it is in the sport.
There is no doubting that Sainz was one of the best all-rounders the sport has ever seen. His commitment lasted from the first rally he did with TTE to his last with Citroën, an impressive career spanning 3 decades. 2 World Championships, 26 wins and podium finishes on almost 50% of the events he started. The stats speak for themselves. One of his biggest rivals in the early 90s was Didier Auriol. Like Sainz, the Frenchman had a fearsome eye for detail, but it was this perfectionist nature that made him a reluctant performer in less than ideal conditions.
Didier is a driver who needs the car to be absolutely perfect to his requirements. Perhaps it took Toyota a little bit too long to get the car as he liked it. But of course, by the end of that first year, Didier had the car how he wanted it, and that helped him a lot in the following year.
He was just a fantastic asset at every stage of the game, but he had to be happy with the car. And that didn't mean the car had to be right, he just had to be happy with the car.
He was never conventional and had a reputation of being aggressive, but there was no doubt to his brilliance. Like most Frenchmen, he had a reputation as a tarmac expert, but his record proves he could win on all surfaces. Carlos and Didier made the podium more times than most, accumulating 59 podium finishes between 1990 and 1994. By winning the Network WRC rally at the end of '93, Juha Kankkunen became the world's most successful rally driver with 20 wins and a record 4th championship. '93 also saw Toyota take their first manufacturer's title. Lancia had withdrawn their manufacturer support, and due to sponsorship clashes, Carlos Sainz had joined the privately run Jolly Club Lancia team.
It was a disappointing year, yes. Lancia, they already knew, I think, they were going to retire the following year. We didn't. And we went, and there was not a lot of development. The team was very good. Claudio Bortoleto was very good to us, but things didn't go right, and we didn't win any event, and we were fighting very hard, and we were testing and working very hard, but things were not coming together.
In hindsight, 1993 was all about new cars. Monte Carlo saw Francois Delacour almost win on the debut of the Ford Escort Cosworth, Ford adding a further 5 wins throughout the year. Another car to debut in '93 was the Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution, although it only achieved 2 podium finishes. Colin McRae took Subaru's first ever win in New Zealand with the Legacy, which was fitting, as on the very next event, Finland, Subaru launched the Impreza, and with Ari Vatanen at the helm, they narrowly missed out on a win. In a Toyota, after years of disappointment, Didier Auriol finally took the championship in 1994. In contrast to his '92 season, he won only on the tarmac of Corsica and San Remo. Even taking the championship on the final event of the year wasn't as easy as it should have been.
We came to the RAC rally with Didier needing to get a certain number of points to win, and he had an absolutely dreadful rally. He went off the road, he knocked a wheel off, he rolled the car, then there was a technical problem with the turbo, and he ended up a long way back and wasn't looking too good for the title at that point, with Carlos up at the front. And I remember Uwe Anderson saying to me as we sat in the management car after all these disasters, does this guy really want to win the World Championship? But yes, he did. He got his act together in the second half of the rally, and Carlos made a mistake in Wales on the final leg. He went off. Didier came through to get the points that he needed.
After their impressive debut year, 94 wasn't to be so good for Ford. Just 2 wins, with Delacour taking a second Monte Carlo and a fledgling Tommi Mäkinen taking his maiden Finland victory. Carlos Sainz had moved to Subaru and immediately proved that the Impreza was not just fast but also a winning car, with victory in Greece. His 24-year-old teammate Colin McRae took another win in New Zealand and on his home event. Mitsubishi had not yet committed to the whole championship, and Armin Schwartz managed to get just a couple of podiums for the Japanese team. But that was all about to change. Still to come, the 2 Japanese giants go head-to-head. The Mäkinen years, from 1996 to 1999, there was only one man everyone wanted to beat. Find out if anyone could after the break. Welcome back to WRC history, the modern era. After Toyota's huge successes at the beginning of the Group A period, the mid-90s saw the beginning of a Japanese revolution. Right behind Toyota came Subaru and Mitsubishi.
I think it gave Mitsubishi in Japan a lot of encouragement. The support was tremendous, and you'd go to an event and there'd be a sea of Mitsubishi jackets or a sea of blue Subaru jackets supporting those cars.
In the red corner, Mitsubishi signed Tommi Mäkinen in '95, and the partnership was to prove to be one of the most successful the sport has ever seen.
It was very much a partnership. It's quite easy to say, yes, it was built around Tommi. That wasn't the case. We had something that he needed. He had something that we needed, and that is supreme driving talent. And putting the two together and making them work was a sign of a good team, and it did work very well and brought a lot of success.
It was very, very unique. I mean, also a big, great leader with Andrew Cohen, who has been there from the beginning and creating the whole team and everything around him. And Andrew was, of course, he was like a father to everybody. And I think that made the whole team, with a small group of people, very enthusiastic and very much into it, with a good working relationship to Japan.
Although they only managed to secure the manufacturer's title once in '98, Mäkinen took a record 4 consecutive World Drivers' titles. In the blue corner, Subaru had been involved in the WRC for a number of years, but it was only when they teamed up with ProDrive and produced the Impreza that they became a serious challenger.
It's been a long uphill battle. Greece for me always holds a very nostalgic and important part of my sort of involvement in rallying. Carlos winning there was a magic moment for us, and it was almost a turning point. I think from that moment on with the Impreza, we started putting in really solid performances. Colin was there, Carlos was there, everyone rallied round because we knew one of them was in with a shout.
1994 saw Sainz and McRae take 8 podiums between them, but '95 was to be their year. Team boss David Richards had the ultimate problem, trying to harness 2 drivers who could both win the title.
It was difficult to manage, I can tell you. It was challenging at times, but I always think that's what management's about. If it was sort of just about managing ordinary people, you get ordinary results. You manage great people, you get great results. I suspect the rivalry was really intense under the surface. You know, on the face of it, everyone was friends and everyone worked well, and that's the style of rallying. It's a bit like going for a round of golf with your pal. You know, it's very civilized, very gentlemanly, but you still want to win.
They were both very competitive, both very quick, both wanted to win, and it was not easy to. And Carlos and Colin, they always had a good relationship. You know, there's always some up and downs, but they've been friends always.
This was the first of 3 consecutive manufacturers' titles for Subaru, and to date, surprisingly, their last. While McRae and Subaru took the title in '95, it was a dreadful year for Toyota. An illegal turbo saw their results stripped and a year's ban in '96. As we've just seen, this era was dominated by two legends of motorsport, Tommy Mäkinen and Colin McRae. They were the biggest rivals, but the best of friends.
They were certainly similar in terms of speed, not necessarily in personality, but they were very, very keen rivals. And when you were looking down a set of stage times, you'd look for those two to see who was setting the pace. Usually it would be one of those two at the top.
Between them, they have 49 victories and the following of thousands of rally fans from all over the globe. And it wasn't only on the stages that they shared a love for boys' toys.
Very similar in nature, both Colin and Tommy. They both like to live on the edge and ride motorbikes fast and do anything fast, and they're both true fighters in cars. Their commitment was incredible, and Tommy would recognise that immediately. There was other drivers in the championship who were probably more tactical, but he probably knew if he was going into a stage and he was having to fight for a win with Colin behind him, he knew he could have a big problem, because you can't play mind games with somebody like Colin. He would just give it his all on any stage.
Career-wise, Colin was mentored by David Richards, who spotted and then nurtured the young Scots' talents.
He came to us probably only 21 years old, I would think. And we treated him a bit like the apprentice to start with. He used to drive the van. We'd sort of send him out in a van and he'd drive the truck round, and sort of Marco Alen can remember him servicing his car on events, and he was very good technically. He could work his way around the car very well, and that stood him in good stead throughout his career. But he was also fairly volatile, and we would have sort of fairly harsh words because we were working on very small budgets, and when Colin threw a car into the trees and sort of destroyed a car, boy, it didn't just hurt me emotionally, it hurt our pocket.
It wasn't only Richard's pockets that hurt. When a rivalry is this intense, someone would always end up in a ditch.
Always something happened. I went off or Colin went off, and we never give up at all. We just pushed flat out.
Hindsight, though, is a great thing, and at the beginning of 1996, there was little hint of the extent of the dominance that Tommy Mäkinen and Mitsubishi would have that year. Colin McRae, who'd been favourite for the title, threw away certain victory in Indonesia and made some other silly mistakes, allowing Mäkinen to cash in. However, the manufacturer's title was once again Subaru's. With no Toyota due to their ban the previous year, Ford were the only remaining team. They had picked up Carlos Sainz, but apart from a sole victory, the team were far from gelling and producing championship-winning results. Mäkinen took the title and made it look almost easy.
It's never easy. I think what set up the season was some good solid results, but also some great wins as well, which meant that Tommy ran out champion relatively soon in the season. He probably wouldn't have a championship that easy the rest of his career.
1997 was a very close-fought competition. Mäkinen eventually took the title, but Colin McRae didn't make it easy for him. Tommy took a disappointing 8 points from the first 3 events before settling into his stride with wins in Portugal, Spain, Argentina and Finland. In the new WRC in Preza, Colin McRae won more events than Mäkinen. However, a mid-season spate of retirements had made Colin's championship campaign near impossible.
Snap steering column or something.
He would finish a single point behind the Finn. As in '96, strong finishes from Piero Liatti and Kenneth Eriksson helped Subaru to their 3rd consecutive manufacturer's title. Carlos Sainz in the new Escort WRC took wins in Greece and Indonesia and was a familiar fixture on the podium, but could only manage 3rd in the drivers' race. And at the end of the season, Toyota debuted their new WRC machine, the Corolla. 97 saw the beginning of the current regulations for rally cars, the WRC. Manufacturers no longer need to produce road-going 4-wheel drive turbocharged cars. The turbo and 4-wheel drive system can now be added to any model produced in sufficient quantities. This meant that more manufacturers could adapt existing cars to become world rally cars.
European manufacturers were not tending to produce special limited edition like 4-wheel drive vehicles. And I think the FIA really felt that they needed to do something to encourage the European manufacturers into the World Championship.
What we really wanted to do was have a new set of rules that allowed any car manufacturer to go to any competent rally team like ProDrive and manufacture a successful car for them. And that was the basis for those World Rally Car rules.
It enabled you to make a two-wheel drive car into a four-wheel drive car. So basically you were given specific dimensions where you could house your suspension, house your differential, again, which was very well regulated by the FIA, and I think, to be honest, it's still the same regulations that's in place today.
The rules were formulated to make it easier for manufacturers to make their cars suitable for World Championship rallying, but in doing that, it also made the cars more specialised and less production-based.
Even to this day, I still think they're the best thought out concept of rules that we've ever had in World Championship rallying. It does allow everyone to come along. It didn't require a great input from the car manufacturer, didn't require building ridiculous numbers of production cars that never got sold or were sold for silly prices. It was controllable. So it was a real milestone at that point in time.
The new WRC formula seemed to be a success, bringing new manufacturers in the shape of Seat to the sport. Only Mitsubishi continued with their Group A car. And in 1998, the championship seemed to come alive. The first 5 events of the season were all won by different drivers. Toyota were back in full force, Oriol and Sainz finally becoming teammates. At Mitsubishi, Richard Burns took 2 victories in his first full WRC year.
He was a good thinking driver, was Richard, and he could put together a rally in the way he wanted to do it. Certainly I remember his Safari win with us was absolutely brilliant in terms of tactics, the way he drove the car, the way he controlled the pace.
Mitsubishi scored 7 wins out of 13 events and won the manufacturer's title ahead of Toyota. By mid-season, it looked like the title race would be between Sainz and Subaru's McRae, with reigning champion Mäkinen a distant 4th. But in the last 4 events of the season, Tommy scored 3 victories, and when Carlos Sainz retired just 500 metres from the end of the final stage in Great Britain, Mäkinen retained his title for a 3rd consecutive time. It seemed that was only a warm-up for '99. First, there was the new Ford Focus WRC, driven by the now most expensive rally driver ever, Colin McRae. He won Portugal and Kenya with it.
To go to Safari, the world's toughest rally, and to go there on your 3rd event with a brand new car and win was just... It didn't really sink in until people like Andrew Cow and Uwe Anderson were saying, how have you managed to do it?
Then there was the new Peugeot 206 at the hands of relative unknown Marcus Gronholm. It was clear the car had speed, but it proved fragile in its first year. Skoda had also started their WRC assault with the Octavia, and Citroën randomly won 2 events in their Zara kit car. But it was the 3 Japanese greats who were battling it out at the top. In what was to be their last season in the sport, Toyota took the manufacturer's title with good podium positions from Sainz, and with Oriol battling tooth and nail with Tommy Mäkinen for the driver's title. Richard Burns had replaced McRae at Subaru, and between him and teammate Kankinen, they notched up 5 wins. The Englishman would finish 2nd in the championship, only 4 points behind his old Mitsubishi teammate, but after a strong start to the season and consistent point scoring, Mäkinen became the first driver to win 4 titles in a row. Tommy's domination came to a sudden halt, and the brightest stars of the 2000 season were Peugeot and Subaru. For the first half of the season, Richard Burns was by far the favourite for the title. The new Impreza 2000 was quick, but the car wasn't quite robust enough, and on too many occasions Burns failed to score decent points. McRae and Sainz were paired at Ford, and more often than not, one would be on the podium. But it was never enough to take the fight to Peugeot and Subaru. Hyundai debuted the Accent without too much success, and Seat failed to shine in what would be their final year in the sport. It wasn't an easy ride for Peugeot, especially after a humiliating Monte Carlo when all 3 cars froze, literally. But in the second half of the season, Marcus Grönholm gained momentum and took his first title. Peugeot, helped along on 2 occasions by the tarmac king Gilles Panizzi, took their first manufacturer's crown. 2001 would be a clash of the titans. 5 drivers, Grönholm, Mäkinen, McRae, Sainz and Burns, from 4 different teams, were more than capable of taking the crown. Defending champion Grönholm struggled all year. His teammates Oriol, Panizzi and Rovanperä all helped to give Peugeot their second manufacturer's crown. Citroën showed a glimpse of the future when Sébastien Loeb came second in San Remo in his first ever outing in a World Rally car.
I was surprised to finish so well because it was my first experience in the WRC. I remember that in the first stage I was maybe 4 seconds behind the best time, and that was a good surprise. I think the most important moment of my career.
Fittingly, it all came down to the last event of the year. 4 drivers could take the title. Mäkinen went out early. Colin did things the McRae way.
He had a very big accident, which put him out of the rally, which was a great disappointment for the whole team and for him as well. But we'd obviously those 3 years he'd been with us, we'd all put a tremendous amount of effort, and we could really see that championship trophy. But sadly, it wasn't to be.
Carlos Sainz had problems of his own and was withdrawn after a collision with spectators. That left Richard Burns to become the first ever English world champion.
You're the best in the world!
The new world champion moved to Peugeot in 2002, but from early on it became apparent that his teammate Grönholm had a point to prove. Marcus took 5 wins and 11 points finishes, handing him the championship 2 rallies early in New Zealand. Richard failed to win a single rally. Mäkinen moved to Subaru and also struggled. His younger, louder teammate notched up his first win in Great Britain and hinted of things to come.
Incredible. That was very, very, very special. Things like this, its memory will be very close to your heart all the time.
And Petter wasn't the only new face to take his first win. Sébastien Loeb winning the inaugural Rally Germany for Citroën, an event he would come to dominate. 2003, and both Sainz and McRae joined the young Loeb at Citroën. They started with a 1-2-3 in Monte Carlo and never looked back. Only 3 podiums through the 16 events were Citroën free, and they took their first manufacturer's title. Ford had a young guns approach with Marco Martin and Francois Duval. The new 03 Ford Focus won almost straight out of the box, but early teething problems denied them any title chances. At Subaru, it was a sad farewell to one of rallying's legends as Tommi Mäkinen decided to hang up his driving boots. However, with 7 podium finishes, Petter Solberg took the title in true Petter Solberg style. Petter Solberg may have won the title in 2003, but there's no doubt that the biggest rivalry of the time was between Grönholm and Burns. Whilst many remember the media-generated clash between McRae and Burns, on the stages, more often than not, it was Grönholm who would be Richard's nemesis. The two had very different methods. Marcus was known for his foot flat to the floor, deal with the consequences later approach.
He just likes to fight for the win. He does not like to fight for the second or for top 3 finishing, so he would just push the throttle and try to win.
Richard, meanwhile, was more of a solid point scorer.
He was a worker, was Richard. He was of the same mould as Carlos Sainz, if you could categorise him. Richard was not the most natural of drivers, in my view, but he made up for it in bounds by his work level, his commitment and his professionalism.
The pair became teammates in 2002, and in the same car, statistics say that Burns could only beat Grönholm on tarmac. But it's interesting to note that Richard was, in his time, the only driver to really challenge Grönholm's superiority on the fastest event in the calendar, Finland. Sadly, it was a rivalry that wasn't allowed to continue after Richard was struck down with cancer that would tragically claim the Englishman's life. Coming up, we've had glimpses of his talent, but after the break, Sébastien Loeb takes us through his journey into the WRC's record books. Welcome back to WRC history, the modern era. After losing out on the 2003 championship by a single point, Sébastien Loeb was ready to take the rallying world by storm. His rise through the ranks had been impressive, and it was plain to see the young Frenchman's talents would soon be rewarded with silverware.
I expected to fight again for the championship. I took some confidence in 2003 when I saw that we are able to fight for victories and that I'm competitive nearly everywhere. So I said, okay, now it's maybe the time to try to fight for that.
The next 2 years saw Loeb and Citroën take both the drivers' and manufacturers' title with surprisingly little resistance. At Subaru, Peter Solberg couldn't retain his championship-winning form. Marco Martin in the new Ford Focus was fast, but failed to finish on too many occasions. Peugeot had introduced the 307, but were plagued with problems, both with the car and Marcus Gronholm.
Engine stall, engine has stalled, and we cannot start.
Throughout 2004, Loeb claimed 6 wins as well as managing 6 second places, underlining his consistency on all surfaces.
When you are driving in World Championship, you hope that one day you will be world champion. And this day it was in Corsica, and I had a lot of friends there. It was also my family. We also won both titles together, my driver title and also the manufacturer. So everything was in France, so it was really a great moment.
The following year, Loeb was even more prolific, taking 10 wins over the season, smashing his record equaling 6 of the previous year.
It was a year where Marcus was purely tired this time, and we had an advantage on the tires. Also against Peter, I think, but sometimes it was a big battle, but sometimes I was a bit alone.
2005 also saw Citroën take their 2nd consecutive manufacturer's title. As well as their driving talent, they looked to have the most reliable car in the championship in the Zara. Gronholm left Peugeot for Ford in 2006, and the Finn's resurgence was immediate. He won the first 2 events.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
Seb, however, was on for another record-breaking year. In Japan, he took his 27th win to make him the most successful driver ever. He was cruising to the title, but a mountain bike accident ended his season prematurely and left Gronholm a chance to steal the championship.
What was difficult to live was that it was not in my hands. I couldn't do anything. I could just stay at home and listen to the results and see that Marcus is flying over all the others and winning, and so that was difficult for me. But finally, Marcus made a mistake in Australia, and then I was champion at home, so that was a new experience.
The 2006 champions fight with Gronholm continued into 2007. This time, Gronholm led for most of the year. The season saw some great battles, including the closest ever rally in New Zealand, where Gronholm's winning margin was a mere 0.3 of a second, the equivalent of 7.6 metres after 350 kilometres.
We had some great battle in a lot of rallies. It was the pressure all the time, all the season, and even in the last race, so that was really very exciting.
On speed alone, they were inseparable, and in the end, it simply came down to who made the most mistakes. 2 consecutive offs for Gronholm in Japan and Ireland handed Loeb the lead and left him only needing a top 4 finish in Wales, which he duly achieved. Loeb had now equalled Mäkkinen's record of 4 consecutive drivers' titles, as well as continuing to be the most successful driver in the history of the sport. A staggering 36 wins at the end of 2007. While Loeb may have swept up the drivers' titles, Gronholm's efforts in 06 and 07 were not wasted, helping Ford to their first manufacturers' titles in 27 years.
That's the one thing that I'm not happy about, the fact that it's taken me so long to win the championship for Ford. Looking back now on reflection, we probably weren't ready to win in those early years, and I think, you know, this business is no different to any other business. You don't build a successful business overnight. The nice thing now is I really feel that, you know, that we can sustain that position. I don't see any reason why we can't remain at the top and keep winning the events for Ford.
But what of the future for the WRC?
The first issue we're trying to address is to control the costs. The second issue we're trying to address is to allow new manufacturers to come in and be competitive.
What I would like to see now, I would like to see the cars, slightly more. I think the advantage of rallying against any other kind of motorsport is that it used to be very spectacular. We don't overtake, because we don't compete like in circuit, we compete against the watch, not against each other. So I think I would like to see it more spectacular.
We have to broaden the appeal to the spectators and the enthusiasts, of course, but also to the other manufacturers. There are some on the fringes that would perhaps like to be involved, but cost is also always a prohibitive issue.
I hope you see a period of stability, and I hope you see a period of planning. We've achieved our first step this year with the single tyre. That's certainly a big cost reduction. Now we're moving to the cars. We're saying the cars have got to come off the mass-produced car. They can only do limited things to it, which what we're calling as a kit. The kit will be controlled as to what it is, and the biggest control is going to be time. They have a limited time in which they can fit the kit, so that in itself is going to control what they can do to the car. That will keep the cost down, and I hope that will enable some of the manufacturers that are presently on the sidelines to look at what we're doing and come back and say, hey, this is a good marketing tool, we can afford to be in there. The cars will be representative of what is sold in the showroom. They'll have this little extra kit clipped to them to make them look good, sound good, and hopefully it'll be great rallying.
The past 20 years have seen some of the most legendary drivers, the most important evolutions in rallying machinery, and some of the best teamwork. And there's plenty more to come from the most dramatic motorsport in the world.